Welcome to a very special American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. We're here today doing our second show that celebrates the 50th anniversary of the Freedom Riders, and we're very pleased to be at the Detroit Public Library as it opens its exhibit celebrating this milestone civil rights event in our history. 50 years ago, more than 400 Black and white Americans challenged segregation in the Deep South. They risked their lives traveling on buses from city to city throughout the South of the United States. They were challenging segregation, seeing if they could get served equally in restaurants and hotels and places like that. But they were also, equally as important, they were challenging a culture that was unwilling to change.
I want to help establish the right of all Americans to eat together and to travel together.
Freedom Riders is the powerful, harrowing, and inspirational story of 6 months in 1961 that changed America forever.
You've got to keep the white and the black separate.
What made you want to take part in this?
I want to help break down this barrier of segregation.
Deliberately violating Jim Crow, the Freedom Riders were met with fierce racism and mob violence along the way.
It was critical that the Freedom Ride not stop and that it be continued immediately.
I asked God to be with me, to give me the strength I would need to remain nonviolent and to forgive them.
We'll take hitting, we'll take beating. We're willing to accept death. But we're going to keep coming until we can ride from anywhere in the South to any place else in the South.
In celebration of the 50-year anniversary, PBS produced and aired American Experience, Freedom Riders, which features testimony from the riders, state and federal government officials, and journalists who witnessed the rides firsthand.
It was a shining moment.
Your parents tell you, don't start something that you can't finish. Finish it.
A detailed narrative of the rides is making its way across America. The Freedom Riders traveling exhibition just arrived in Detroit. Through November 2nd, the exhibit will be open to the public at the main branch of the Detroit Public Library.
I was particularly interested in bringing it to Detroit because of Detroit's personal connection to the Freedom Riders. I know what exhibits can do. They can inspire and inform and have people sometime act on it.
The exhibit illustrates this amazing journey of nonviolent activism with vivid archival photos and newspaper clippings that document this pivotal event in the civil rights movement.
They put their lives in danger to do things and to help others. And I think we just wanted it to be something that you know a little bit about your history, but you could use it for your future as well.
Our first guest was a 24-year-old minister in Chicago when he joined the Freedom Rides in Mississippi. Let's welcome to the stage Reverend Gleason.
Hi.
Hi. So let's talk about that. I mean, you're a 24-year-old minister in Chicago. You aren't necessarily part of what's going on in the South. Did you see it somewhere and become interested? How did you end up being one of the Freedom Riders?
I was living on the south side of Chicago in the Robert Taylor Homes, the country's largest public housing project.
Very famous housing
and
project.
Saw the effects of racism and segregation and injustice. And May 15th, when the bus got burned, the Freedom Riders bus got burned down south, I decided I had to go. Had no option.
So you saw this on television?
Yes.
And were moved enough to say, I have to go and be part of it.
Get down there.
And so you go, and you're in Montgomery, correct? Or,
Montgomery,
yeah.
And this was about 2.5 weeks after the bus got burned, June 2nd, 1961.
And what happened when you got there?
Wow. It was, none of the Freedom Riders knew what to expect. The bus did get burnt, and typically the police would allow the Klansmen to beat the Freedom Riders up.
As they were getting
And then
off,
they would shoot the gun once, and then they would stop it, But crossing the Mississippi line was the scariest thing, and unbelievable.
Right.
but we made it.
And you ended up being arrested
In jail.
For what?
It was called. It was an ordinance because the Supreme Court had said it's okay to ride the buses and all, but so it's breach of peace was the ordinance that they booked us on. And
this is because you gave your seat up on the bus for an African American.
Well, I got down to Jackson, Mississippi, and my goal was to get into colored waiting room, and I did that, and I was arrested.
Okay, and you were arrested just for being in the colored waiting room, right? And that's one of the things that I think people now don't necessarily quite fathom is that these were not violent protests. These were not confrontational, even protests.
Or unlawful, according to the Supreme Court.
Right. You were merely following what you thought was the law of the land, and you were arrested for it.
Yes.
Yeah. And you've got a photo of.
Yeah. This is me.
It's your mugshot, right?
At 24.
Right, in jail.
I think an interesting thing, too, Mr. Henderson, is that half the Freedom Riders were white, half black, 2/3 men, and they were rich, poor, educated, uneducated, from the north, south, east, and west. It wasn't any particular stereotype. Right.
It was. It was a very cross-racial.
Yes, it was.
Event. Tell me though, you're 24 years old, you're from Chicago, you're in Mississippi, you're arrested and put in jail. Tell me you had to have been fearful at that point.
Well, I grew up in Lyons, Ohio, a little country boy. And before I got to Chicago, I'd never seen an elevated or cab or anything like that. But again, what I saw in the inner city of Chicago compelled me to do it. And I really believed as a Christian, I had no option but to do my part.
Right.
And so I don't think any of the Freedom Riders many Freedom Riders would have a will written out the night before. I mean, it was just really a very tense situation.
Right.
But it was a different attitude back in the 61.
Yeah.
I wish we could have that today.
Well, and you're 24 years old at that point. Now, obviously, let's say much wiser than you were then. Can you recall that spirit though, that sort of conviction that you had then to go do that? I mean, is that something that you see?
I have the same conviction today. Wiser or foolish, whatever. I really do. And I wish something would happen today that would change the climate of our country, that would bring people together in fairness and justice for all people.
I've seen that as a minister, you spend a lot of time working even today with young people. Do you see among young people today the same kind of self-sacrifice or drive or conviction that pushed you to do what you did in 1961?
Back in Chicago, I was there 20 years in an all-black community, working with the most hopeless, desperate kids. And I understood a little of what they felt because as a child in my own home and in my own school, I felt helpless.
Right.
And it was the church that pulled me through. Today, our young people need mentors. They need relationships. They need people really involved with them. With all the religious institutions in our metro area, why aren't we taking them one by one, pulling them in, mentoring them? I had a group of kids, we had gang kids I worked with for 6 years, and after 12 teenage funerals in 1 month, I took the younger brothers and sisters, 365, until they finished high school. Got college students to help mentoring them. And when Oprah had us, the Freedom Riders, back in May, I had a reunion of the kids I worked with. And in our choir of 33, there were 8 bachelor degrees, 1 master's degree, and one of our kids a doctorate degree. It takes mentoring, the same involvement and love and support it takes in suburbia, it takes with our kids everywhere.
Amen. Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you for being here. Okay, does anyone have questions for the man?
Yes, I have a question for Reverend Gleason. First of all, I want to say that I hold you in high regard, sir, for what you've taken place, what you took part in the movement. But I want to know, I'm amazed by the amount of courage that y'all had at the time back in 1965. Because, for example, if you had a sit-in in front of a business and you knew that a business person wasn't, he wasn't there at the time, but when he arrived, you were going to get your head split open. Where did you get that courage? Because we haven't seen that in this country, because you had a whole movement of young people, you had a whole generation of young people who was willing to take part in a nonviolent cause. You didn't defend yourself, but you was there to take that beating. As we heard in the film, one young man said he was willing to die, but he would come back, again and again. Where did y'all get that courage?
I didn't see it as courage. I just knew I had to go. Today, I have a passion for social justice. It isn't an option. I just feel it. I breathe it. I think it. I feel it. I touch it. I mean, it's just me. And I think that it's in all of us. If we're willing to open our eyes, open our ears, reach out and feel, instead of just becoming islands to ourselves. I think it's in all of us.
Reverend Gleason, I'm curious, what did your parents think or say
Lord have mercy.
when you did it?
Lyons, Ohio, south of Adrian. 500 population. The poorest family in town. A boy who was bullied in school. Difficult childhood. I was hospitalized by a gang and hospitalized, and Mahalia became a good friend, and she came to our town in Lyons, Ohio. But guess what happened? They called the county sheriff. Later, I took a number of kids to the farmers, lived in the farmers' homes, they rode on the farmer tractors. It just changed the community entirely. So it's reaching out, touching, hearing, just experiencing each other.
Next question.
I'd like to introduce myself as an adult and alternative educator for the past 30 years. And I wanted to just create a different framework from the impression that Carrie may have unintentionally created when she talked about alternative schools. Alternative schools educators know that the children that we're serving have the highest need for a professional community in a school system. And that means not just teachers, but nurses, social workers, counselors, community assistants, lunchroom supervisors. There's a high need there. And to meet that need costs money. And so my experience as an educator for the last 30 years is that the state and the legislators are the people pushing online education. And online education cannot meet the needs of everyone. It's one approach to education, but it is not being pushed by the educators. It's being pushed by the state, and it's looked at as a way to save money. We cannot save money on the backs of our children. So I just wanted to correct that and also ask the panelists to address how we do meet the needs of our children, which are ever growing when the cuts are being made more and more every day. Thank you.
Yeah, let me just say thank you. Absolutely, you're right, and I certainly never intended to suggest that educators believe that online education is the best form of alternative education, nor did I mean to criticize alternative schools. I was telling a story about what I think is a bad alternative school. And in fact, we've been advocating strongly for more alternative schools to place children who are getting suspended and expelled somewhere so they're not completely lost to the education system. And that is another big issue in this state, is in the kind of a wake of Columbine and the state zero tolerance law, children are being suspended and expelled at extraordinary rates, and black children in particular are being suspended and expelled at extraordinary rates for things that white children are not being thrown out of school for, and we call it the school to prison pipeline, right? You kick kids out of school and their path is prison. So alternative schools are where they should go. I recognize that there's tremendous value in using technology as an education method. I don't know that we've done the hard work to figure out how you use technology and online education effectively and how you combine it with real quality teachers effectively. What I saw in this one case, in this one school, was that the kids were being warehoused. And I'm going to call that out when I see that.
Next question.
Yes, I'm really happy tonight to be here and represent 3 generations of my family here this evening. And this summer we also visited the International Civil Rights Museum in Greensboro, North Carolina, the site of the World War sit-in. And my concern is we talk about it takes a village to raise a child. My theory is if the village has issues, what kind of children are we raising? We have churches, we have community organizations, we have sororities. Is there anyone sitting down at the table and saying, how do we bring all of these groups together to educate our young people on the history so that they can appreciate where they are and where they need to go?
Anyone want to take that one? That was a big question, right? Great question, but a big one, right?
Yeah.
And
it's something that's really needed. I mean, I think individually within organizations, there are people that are trying to step up, but there is no broad movement that where everybody, no big huge table where everyone can sit and move in the same direction.
Yeah.
And we need that. Well, we need someone to lead on it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Meanwhile, since we don't have that broad coalition, we can individually make a difference in someone's life. That's right. And if each of our religious organizations would take in some of these kids and really mentor them, kids don't want to hear history. They want to know, do you like me? Do you see me? Do you have any faith in me? Any possibilities in me? Can you see in me what I can't see in myself? That's what they want to know.
Okay, that's it for the questions. But we do have Tiana Trombley, who we saw featured in the video, a student from Huron High School. Is that right? She'd like to say something.
Hi, I just want to say thank you for all that you guys have done for our community today, in the past and right now. Thank you so much.
I want to make sure we give our panel a big hand. Thank them very much for being here. I want to thank the Detroit Public Library for hosting us here tonight. This was wonderful, and this exhibit, the Freedom Riders Traveling Exhibit, is going to be here at the library until November 2nd. Please come out and see that. I want to thank the audience. Thank you for being here on a night when there's also baseball going on. Give yourselves a hand. And I want to thank the audience at home for watching. I'm Stephen Henderson. I'll see you next time on American Black Journal.